Privyet, book readers. Put on your parka, pour a shot of vodka, and get set to learn about 5 books set in Russia that have as many layers as a matryoshka doll. But we're not talking Tolstoy or discussing Dostoevsky. Today I'm sharing a small book list about the biggest country in the world. First book is City of Thieves by David Benioff. Yes, one of the showrunners for the HBO adaptation of Game of Thrones. Set shortly after the Nazi siege of Leningrad, aka St. Petersburg, in 1941, this historical fiction novel features an impossible mission. 2 young Russian prisoners, Lev, who is caught looting, and a deserter named Kolya, are allowed to live, only if they track down a dozen eggs for a Soviet colonel to use in his daughter's wedding cake. And winter is coming. No, just kidding, but it sounds like a pretty absurd premise, right? The difficult part is that the city is in ruins, so Lev and Kolya have to go behind enemy lines to, let me say it again, find eggs for a cake. The historical setting really just becomes a backdrop for a daring adventure, some dark comedy, and a brothership formed between 2 contrasting characters, one innocent and one world-wise, one a Cossack and one a Jew. You'll laugh, you'll cry, and you won't want to put it down. This has buddy story vibes. And since it's Benioff with his Game of Thrones ties, I'll say that the friendship in City of Thieves is reminiscent of the relationship between Jaime and Tyrion Lannister. They're completely different in almost every way, but there's a brotherly love that's been created because of everything they've been through together. City of Thieves will leave you wondering, why have I ever complained about inflation affecting egg prices? Next is A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. I finally read this after it was recommended to me by multiple family members, and all I can say is that if you live for excellent characters, this is the book for you. Chef Emile, Andre the Bishop, and obviously the Count are all so good. Here's the deal. Count Alexander Rostov is sentenced to live under house arrest in the early 1900s in a fancy Moscow hotel. If there's anything I learned in my youth from Dunstan Checks In and The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, it's that a lot can happen in a hotel. You'll get to know the charming, witty, and cultured Count inside and out as you see him and the special women in his life live, laugh, and love in the Metropole Hotel over several decades. As the book moves smoothly along, you'll learn the daily habits of the cast of characters that work there. You'll look forward to the frequent guests, and you'll see the Count adapt to different circumstances as Russia slowly changes around him. I envy anybody who hasn't read this book yet because you have a wonderful experience ahead of you. It has beautiful writing, poignant moments, wonderful dialogue. I mean, there's really not much more I can say other than it's a perfect book. And I'm sure I'll reread it in the next couple of years. And it'll leave you wondering, in a battle of fictional counts, Monte Cristo versus Dracula versus Rostov, who comes out on top? Moving on to The Diamond Eye by Kate Quinn. This is Kate Quinn's bread and butter. World War I or World War II setting, strong female lead with a difficult backstory and something to prove as she transforms into an important part of the war effort. There's a love interest or a love triangle usually, a best friend or two, and there's usually a final showdown with the bad guy that the book slowly builds up to starting from page 1. It's a formula that works just about every time for me. Here's the short synopsis. As Mila Pavlyuchenko is touring the US in an effort to convince the Americans to join the fight against the Nazis, she's the target of a shadowy marksman who's been hired to assassinate FDR, yes, FDR is in this, and frame Mila for doing it. We see via flashbacks Mila change from historian to lethal sniper, and how her growing reputation is affecting her and those around her, creating everything from admiration to jealousy. At its heart, The Diamond Eye is a book about relationships and how love or hate can take different forms. There's the passionate love that a young Mila felt for her first husband, Alexei, until she quickly realized that she was just an object to him. There's the deep connection and oneness she feels with her sniper partner, Kostya. There's also the love a mother has for the son, and the love between 2 friends with Ludmila and Eleanor Roosevelt. Yes, Eleanor Roosevelt is in this book. The Diamond Eye also explains how killing another human being can be done with numerous motivations and several different emotions behind it, from cold, calculating indifference to long, simmering rage. But with each death, there's a price to pay, mentally and emotionally, for the killer. What's an interesting thing to note is that Quinn was inspired by the real story of Ludmila Pavlyuchenko, meaning some of the characters and events in this novel did actually happen. Like Mila did meet the Roosevelts and Hollywood stars while in America. I highly suggest reading the author's notes at the end of the book to get a better sense of what was truth and fiction. Usually I don't read the end, author's notes, but this one comes in handy. This is probably my third favorite Kate Quinn book behind The Alice Network and The Huntress. I would have liked more from the supporting characters, and I audibly groaned at a super cheesy, coincidental moment toward the end involving the Roosevelts. If you read the book, you'll know the exact moment I mean. It literally pained me that this part was included and not axed by some sensible editor at some point. The vibes on this one are Shooter with Mark Wahlberg and Enemy at the Gates with Jude Law. I love how these movies and The Diamond Eye show how patience is such a big part of sniper battles. Obviously, I could never be a sniper. I'd get bored or hungry too quickly and just wave the white flag. And this book will leave you wondering, when I sit in my living room reading a book at night with the curtains open, am I making the sniper's job too easy? Our next book is The Tiger, a true story of vengeance and survival by John Valiant. In 1997, a tiger killed a hunter in eastern Russia and is prowling around looking for more. So people in this remote village are on the hunt for the man-eater. But no, this isn't just a bunch of guys in Vladivostok going around saying, "Here, kitty, 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 here, kitty, kitty, kitty." This story is for real. Yes, it actually happened. Valiant turns it into literary nonfiction, giving it stylistic oomph, so the recounting of the tale isn't dry. He paints a vivid picture of who's hunting who, creating "you'd better look over your shoulder" moments that really bring the story to life. If this was a boxing match, it would have been dubbed Man vs. Tiger in the Taiga. The author digs into the history of the area, politics, ecology, detailed information about tigers, and so much more. It leaves the main story of our striped feline nemesis feeling like the tiny dollop of sour cream atop the borscht instead of the thick, hearty, beady base. Long story short, there's often too little tiger hunting and too much backstory. I have a cat, so I speak from experience when I say you don't want to piss off these furballs. Even the little cute ones are vengeful. They're purring 1 second, but if you dare to do so much as look at them the wrong way, they'll gnaw your arm off. We see these big cats in zoos and think, wow, they're beautiful, majestic, graceful creatures. They peddle cereal, they play baseball in Detroit, and they teach important life lessons that my 2-year-old craves like crack. We lose sight of the fact that they're mean, orange, stalking and killing machines. If nothing else, this book should be a lesson to you. Always pack and bring a laser pointer to deter any tigers that might be prowling your neighborhood. This book reminded me of the movie Jaws, thanks to the top of the food chain predator that's bound and determined to outsmart humans in a battle to the death. And it'll leave you wondering, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? And finally, there's The Witch and the Tsar by Olesya Salnikova-Gilmore. Probably not pronouncing that correctly. I first heard of Baba Yaga when I was young because my aunt would use Babushka Baba Yaga as a threat. As in, you'd better not do that or Baba Yaga will cook and eat you. And that was my introduction to cannibalism. In The Witch and the Tsar, the half-goddess Baba Yaga is a misunderstood immortal healer with magical powers, not the mean old forest witch most readers familiar with other stories of Baba Yaga might think of. However, since the Russian people in the book have come to fear her over hundreds of years, she now lives deep in the woods with only an owl, a wolf, and a house on chicken legs as her companions. Anastasia, Baba Yaga's longtime friend and the wife of Tsar Ivan, comes to Baba Yaga, asking her to come to the royal court and protect Anastasia from an unknown assailant. As Tsar Ivan morphs into the evil, power-hungry Ivan the Terrible, Baba Yaga journeys far and wide, even into the realm of the gods, in a quest to save Russia and its people. It doesn't quite reach the high expectations I had for it, unfortunately. That's partly because I thought it tried too hard to become a sprawling epic rather than focusing on and developing the characters more. But I did think that the descriptions of the Russian landscape were outstanding, and I enjoyed the parts where Baba Yaga was doing magical training in order to get her magically stronger. It was like CrossFit for witches. Cross-witch! I don't know much about Russian folklore or history, so I'm sure there's a lot of layers that I missed. But from what I can tell, this book meshes fact and fiction pretty well. One tip for when to read this, I would suggest during winter, alongside a cup of black tea with sugar, lemon, milk, or jam, which is the classic Russian tea sweetener. As for vibes, this seemed a little bit like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, because there's a mix of magical beings and non-magical people set in a foreign land. I guess that describes Harry Potter too, but The Witch and the Tsar is way closer to Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell because of the dark, ethereal atmosphere Gilmore creates in certain passages. And it'll leave you wondering, is being the victim of cannibalism a compliment? There you have it, 5 books set in Russia. R.I.P. Laika, the space dog, and happy reading.